Okay, friends, so you know about dairy goats and milk cows. We've talked about those many times here on the show. But did you know there's a third option that just isn't discussed as much, or at least it hasn't been until now? And we're changing that today. And of course, I'm talking about dairy sheep. And I have never talked about this topic on the show. I know nothing about this topic, so I thought I would go straight to the source. The woman who literally wrote the book on dairy sheep. I have Rachel here today with me. She's from Whoopsy Daisy Farm. And I cannot wait for this conversation because, like I said, I know nothing. And I feel like this can be potentially a really interesting option for those of you who want to add home dairy to your homestead, but maybe the goat's not in the cards or the cow's not in the cards for whatever reason. You may just find this to be your perfect match. So welcome, Rachel. I'm excited to talk all things sheep.
Thanks, Jill. I'm excited too.
Yeah. So, like I said, I'm going to probably ask some dumb questions because I've never even owned any sort of sheep, let alone a dairy sheep.
That's
so,
okay.
Yeah.
Talk with me about how hair sheep are what makes the world go round. We're good. So,
okay, there you go. We're good. So I guess let's just start with the most basic of questions. Why? Why would we consider dairy sheep over the more popular conventional dairy goat, milk cow? Like, why would someone want to look into this as an option?
Well, there's actually several reasons. Goats are notorious for escaping because they want to wander and browse. Sheep do not typically have that problem. They're a lot more easier to manage. There's this misnomer that sheep are more challenging than goats, for example, and that is really not true. They're actually quite easier. They're more parasite resistant than goats. They really want to be comfortable. They're not super exploratory or curious. They want to feel safe. So as long as you as a shepherd make them feel safe, odds are they're going to stay where you put them. They're also a lot smaller than cows, for example. To purchase a sheep is going to be a fraction of the cost than purchasing a cow. Now, you do need to own more than one sheep typically, but even then, if you get 3 sheep, you're still looking at a far lower cost than one cow. A dairy cow is going to drink, I think it's 50 gallons of water a day. A lactating, you will drink 2.5 gallons per day. So, for people in desert conditions or where water's an issue or who just don't want to be bringing in a ton of city water, a sheep is more economical just on a water perspective. They also don't want to be 1,000% grass fed, which I know this is a hot spot topic in the homesteading community now of, you either must be legalistic grass fed or legalistic, the opposite end of the spectrum. Sheep are between cows and goats and that they want some browse, they want some weeds, they want some fruits and vegetables and that kind of stuff. They do want good quality grass, but, if you're wanting to improve a particular spot, sheep can still thrive in that setting, provided you give them the proper nutrition and minerals and all that. So that's just like a tip of the iceberg of all the reasons why you would consider sheep. They're smaller. They're a lot more docile. Like, I took my 1.5-year-old out to the sheep paddock the other day and he just roamed around like he was grabbing the sheep's nostrils and yanking their faces around. And they were just like, okay, I wouldn't do that in a paddock full of cows, not because the cows are going to try to hurt them. They're just not as aware and they're bigger. So, and goats are just very Labrador Retriever-ish. So, they would, through their exuberance of love, potentially hurt him. And sheep are just like, where's the food? No? Okay, I'm going to go find some.
Yeah, sure. So that's interesting about the escaping because I actually didn't know that. I just assumed that sheep were similar to goats and that you can't keep them in. So will they respect a barbed wire fence? Will they crawl through that?
Barbed wire fence is really only good for beef cow, from my understanding.
Okay.
You do.
Dang it.
Yeah, I know. I do have a friend who keeps her sheep on is it polywire when it's one strand of the electro fencing?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, just a single strand. Sure.
She'll use 3 strands, but like she wires them. I have Gulf Coast natives and dairy crosses, and my Gulf Coast natives do sometimes think they're goats. So I have seen them worm their way through a 1-foot long gap between the 2 panels of electronet. which is very irritating. Because you look at that amount of space, and you're like, there's no way 150-pound sheep can fit through that. But there they are outside of the fence. But the only time that they've done that is when we didn't change their paddocks in a timely manner. So my husband's in emergency services, so his schedule changing, it does not allow us to be super legalistic about all the buzzwords. So, we use Electronet, we do rotational grazing, but I mean, sometimes it's a week or two before we can switch paddocks. So when that happens, the sheep take it upon themselves to get a new paddock out of consideration for us. And then our neighbors called. The neighbors called and they're like, hey, you've got free range sheep. Did you mean to do that? We're like, no, that was the Gulf Coast taking initiative again. But like I said, they really only do that if they're hungry and they don't have food. The other time I've had sheep bust out of fences is we had a younger ram with older rams, and they were basically reestablished in the pecking order. And the younger ram just took the route of conscientious objector to violence and just hopped over the fence. And he didn't wander away. He just kept the fence between him and the bigger ram so they couldn't fight. Or I've actually had ewes break out of fencing to get to a ram, more than I've had rams break out of fencing to get to a ewe, which I find kind of funny. Then one time, we were still trying to be really sticklers for, quarantine the new sheep and making sure biohazards weren't a thing. And the sheep was like, we don't need to worry about that. So she jumped an 8-foot fence to get to the rest of the sheep and then never jumped a fence after that. And she was like just weaned, like a lamb. Like she wasn't huge, but she got over this huge fence to get to the rest of the flock. So, I mean, they do escape, but it's only under really certain circumstances. Like they're either lonely or they're hungry or they don't want to fight. So, if you're keeping an eye on your sheep consistently, you shouldn't have those issues. But it's not like goats where you fed them, you watered them, you moved them, and they still end up on the top of your car because they just felt like it that day. So Yes, that is so goat. So very goat. Always eating trees. That's like all they do at my house is eat. I still have a little herd of dairy goats that we don't have bred back, so they're just there. They're just nothingness. They're just there, and they still get out and eat the trees. And I'm like, oh my gosh, got to solve this problem. So anyway, okay, that's good to know. I'm curious. You mentioned numbers, like you said, you might have 3 sheep. Is that, I know they are a herd animal, like a goat, you don't want to have a single goat. Are you recommending at least 2 sheep? Do you need to have more than that? Like if someone's just starting, what's an ideal number for a small herd? So like if you were just getting into dairy sheep, I would recommend you start off with 4 sheep. So you're going to have 2 ewes and then you're going to have a ram and a wether. And that way, when you separate your ram from the ewes, he still has a buddy. I do know people, like there's this lady I follow in England on Instagram, and she has 1 border Leicester sheep. She lives in their little cottage garden. She comes into the house to have tea time with the family, and that sheep is fine. But I mean, she's essentially the family dog, just in a sheep form. So if you're not going to do that, they really do need to have another buddy, because they really believe there's safety in numbers. They are on the bottom of the food chain. So, we have noticed that our rams especially were a lot calmer when they had a group of 3 or 4. Now, granted, that's just not feasible for a lot of people, especially if you're on a much smaller acreage or what have you. But, we got away with a ram and a wether, but they just seem to be happier with a larger group after that. So, I mean, they really are a flock animal. They're not a clique or buddy system animal. So, but to start out, I would say 4.
Okay, that's good to know. Yeah, the herd animal thing really does matter. Just with so many species, I think I've seen a lot of homesteaders try to cheat the system just a little bit, and the animals just don't thrive. They just really need those numbers.
Yeah, and I think starting out is different than what your long-term plan is. I mean, we have 30 head right now. We started off with 2. You've got to start somewhere. But I would say plan to have a group of girls and then maybe more than 1 or 2 boys, just because, if you're going to be in this sustainably, with dairy sheep on the rise of interest, I have to really proactively set aside animals I want to butcher because I have so many requests for people wanting to buy breeding stock. So, I mean, if you get into dairy sheep and you advertise it right, you can have a viable homestead business selling breeding stock. So it really behooves you to have more than 1 male so you can sell starter flocks and they're not just all related.
Interesting. And yeah, I like that business aspect too. That makes sense. And I think that could be really interesting to a lot of folks because this is not a saturated area of homesteading.
It's really not.
There's a lot of potential
Yes.
for opportunity.
Yes.
Okay, so you've mentioned a couple breeds. The Gulf Coast, I've never even heard of that.
Most people So Gulf Coast, So Gulf Coast natives are actually not a dairy breed of sheep at all. They are a landrace breed from the American South. They're critically endangered. We joke that they are apocalypse sheep because they can thrive on the crappiest pasture in the American South. They are very parasite resistant. They're excellent mothers. I mean, I have had to assist one stillbirth, and that's because the cow caused a miscarriage with the ewe. That was just a mismanagement on our part. So, I mean, we'll go out and check the sheep and we'll come back an hour later and there's a lamb that's all dried off. So the flip side is they're not an improved breed. So I will get maybe a pint of milk per sheep per day. I have to lamb share or they will dry up, and I am only milking them for tops 3 months at a time. So they were kind of, and still kind of are our experiment for people who really want to be like, no input and completely off grid and, completely sustainable. Like the grid is going down. And I like the thought that I'm helping to save a breed. That just helps my Messiah complex. So,
yeah, for sure.
And then we also have dairy mutts. So the dynamic with dairy breed sheep in America today is we do not have purebred dairy breed sheep at this time. We have sheep that are in breeding up programs, which means that we're still importing fertilized embryos or semen, and we're either doing artificial insemination or what's it called, where you implant the embryo in the ewe?
Embryo transfer.
Yes. So and with that method, it's a very small percentage of successive pregnancy. So like I know in Shepherdess, she implanted 6 embryos and only 1 was a viable lamb. So it's incredibly expensive. You have to import it from overseas. You have to get a veterinarian to do it. Because AI in sheep is more surgical than like with a cow. So, that being said, you really have to have a strong passion of bringing dairy sheep to the United States, and you want a specific breed and you have a lot of cash just floating around. Most of us aren't in that situation. So, the people who are doing this and selling breeding stock are charging, $900 to $3,000 a head. So like you're investing in, a really good genetic quality of sheep potentially. But on the flip side, what I have noticed with friends who have invested in those type of animals, they just seem to be a bit weaker overall. And I think that's because we are freezing semen and freezing eggs and doing all the surgery stuff. And I think long term they will strengthen up. But in the, right now, those offspring are just not as strong or viable as if they were conceived and carried naturally. So, and that's just my hypothesis. I'm sure I'll make several dairy shepherds mad by saying that, but that's my opinion. So, so that being said, there are crossbreeds of people who have implanted an embryo in, say, a different breed of sheep, and those offspring are crossbred, or I'm sorry, if they do artificial insemination with the semen, then those offspring are crossbred. So I've gotten my dairy stock from culls from those systems where they were wanting to get higher and higher percentage. So I got lower percentage dairy specific breeds, but they still have a decent milk supply. So for, your average homesteader just starting out wanting to just have milk, I would recommend more going either the crossbred route or even a non-dairy breed of sheep just to get milk and get you into sheep. And then if you find you really do like this and you want the higher volume of milk, then you can invest in the higher percentage breeds of sheep. So anyway, that being said, the breeds of dairy sheep are East Frisian, which is like the sheep Holstein. Like they can give up to a gallon a day. They have a reputation for being more fragile, even when you get the purebreds over in Europe, which makes breeders of East Frisians very irritated because they're like, they're not weaker than other breeds of sheep. I'm like, well, empirical evidence shows they're putting so much protein into the milk, they're not reserving that protein for hardiness. So, if you're raising fine wool breeds of sheep, the tenderness aspect is about on par because the fine wools are, again, putting all that protein into wool production, not hardiness. So, I have a friend in North Carolina, and she raises really fine wool breeds and then East Frisians. And she's like, the East Frisians are actually hardier than the fine wools. But again, I mean, you have to think like the fine wools are typically more commercially raised. They've been bred for certain things and inbred for a long time. So the rules are typically there because of management, not by fault of the breed or that kind of thing. The next one, which is the most popular globally, is the Whoopsy sheep. They don't give as much milk as the East Frisian, but they are hardier. Their wool is very decidedly rug yarn wool. It's like a Brillo pad. Like it makes gorgeous wools. I don't know if I would do anything else with the wool, and I am a hardcore wool enthusiast. I will wear East Frisian garments. I will not wear Whoopsy garments. The next breed is actually a crossbreed of the two that was developed in Israel, and it's called the Asaph. So you breed an East Frisian to an Whoopsy, and then you breed that offspring back to an East Frisian, and you have an Asaph, and they're now recognized as their own breed. So they have more volume and better wool and more hardiness is what they were going for. The next one is Lacone, which is a French breed of sheep where we get Roquefort cheese from. And they're really, really, really rare in the United States. I think one university imported genetics from Canada like 5 or 10 years ago. And I think one other person is working on it in maybe Texas, but I haven't found any high percentage Lacones. I'd love to because they kind of seem the best of all the worlds. Like they've got decent wool. They're somewhat friendly. They're hardy. They have really good milk supply. I have heard their milk is a little bit more perfumed, as the French say. So you're going to have like the goat milk dynamic there. If you like it, you like it. If you don't like it, you don't like it. I can't speak from experience because like I said, I haven't found high percentage Lacone. I'm really hoping someday that a really rich person hears me talk and is like, I should pay for that girl to go overseas and like meet all these dairy shepherds, but so far I've not had that experience. So
maybe a listener, maybe we'll have a dairy sheep investor listening right at this moment.
That would be great.
Call Rachel.
Right. Yeah,
if that is you.
So, those are the dairy breeds we have available in the United States. Now, if you go overseas, there's a lot more dairy specific breeds like the churro sheep or the British milk sheep. I don't know all those breeds because I was just focusing on researching breeds we had genetic access to here in the United States. So, the Clune Forest sheep is not considered specifically a dairy breed of sheep. They're more a meat breed of sheep. However, historically in the, I want to say it's the, Worcestershire County of England. I think that's where they're from, but they're from the same county as Shropshire sheep. And historically, the British people milked the Clune Forest like any other dairy breed of sheep. Of all the dairy breeds, or of all the sheep breeds whose milk has been tested, Clune Forest have the highest amount of butter fat. So they have been called the dairy or the Jersey cow of dairy sheep. Again, some breeders of Clune Forest get very offended by that because they're like, no, they're meat sheep, they're wool sheep, they're not dairy sheep. And I'm like, I don't know why you emotionally have an investment in that. If people want to get high fat sheep milk, then by all means, they're the one breed of sheep in America that we have an actual breed association for a breed that's been used for milk. So I really need to contact the Clune Forest Breed Association because apparently I've sold about 5 flocks for them and have gotten no kickbacks for that. So, so those are the dairy specific breeds. Now, if you look historically at other breeds like Cheviot sheep or, Gulf Coast native or Navajo churro, historically they have been milked, but they were not selectively bred for milk production. So
listening to you talk, like this is a newer industry, if you want to call it that, than I even thought. Like I was just thinking maybe I had my head in the sand here in Wyoming. We don't have a lot of dairy sheep here, but I'm like, wow, these breeds haven't even been really, there's not a lot of them here. They're still being developed. That's kind of exciting.
Yeah.
Like I like being on the ground floor of stuff like that. I like it when it hasn't been already done and redone a million times.
Yes,
so that's pretty cool.
And actually, you in Wyoming, you're actually more in sheep country than, I am here in Kentucky. So, I mean, of all people who would have heard of it, I would think you would have been one of them. But yeah, I mean, it's not a super common thing in the United States right now. And there's a whole backstory of the cattle industry in England and then America wanting to ostracize shepherding for political reasons, which I don't know enough to speak to vehemently. So I won't talk about it yet because I'll make cow people mad. But, long-term history, the Neanderthal archaeological digs, when they tested the milk residue on the pottery shards, they think it's actually sheep milk. So it's potentially sheep were the first domesticated dairy animal.
Oh, fascinating. Yeah, because it really has been pushed to the wayside. And even like here in Wyoming, dairy sheep is not a thing, but like we'll have occasionally operations with regular sheep, just commercial industrial sheep. And like there's still that animosity from the cattle ranchers to the sheep people, and they call them maggots, and they like, they say they ruin things. And like, it's kind of crazy. Like it's a carryover from like 100 years ago when there was the wars.
Well, and apparently there was like, it was really intense out west. I mean, there was like assassinations over it and stuff.
Yes.
And so
there was actual little wars. Yeah. Yep. So we still have a little bit of that going on.
Well, even here in Kentucky, like when people find out I raise sheep, that like I will have people argue, like stop me and argue with me and say, "Oh, sheep are stupid," and I'm like, "Well, they're really not." They're like, "No, they are. They really are stupid." And I'm like, "I raised them. I think I know more than you about them." So anyway, people are funny.
Yes, that's fascinating. Okay, so now, these are, and I feel like my breed awareness has grown. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So many of these are, and again, here's my ignorance speaking, these are hair sheep. So we could get some milk, we could get some hair. And then even if it's not a dairy breed, or excuse me, not a meat breed feasibly, we could still be processing some of the culls for meat if we wanted to, right? Like, is that still worthwhile to do that?
Well, number one, I'm going to correct you. These are not hair sheep.
Okay.
These are wool sheep, and all the wool enthusiasts just had an aneurysm, just so you know.
Okay. So sorry, everyone. Please forgive me. Do not email me over this. It was an honest mistake.
Do it. No. So there are hair breeds of sheep and there are wool breeds of sheep. All the dairy breeds of sheep are wool breeds.
Wool. Got it.
Yes.
Okay.
Which is important because there are hair breeds of sheep. And again, politically, for some reason, the hair breeds of sheep got a better PR person than the wool breed people did. And so there is, again, this misnomer that makes me very angry that hair breed sheep produce better tasting meat. So if you want good tasting meat, the rumor is don't get a wool breed of sheep because the lanolin makes the meat taste terrible. I have actually found the opposite to be true. I don't like hair breed sheep meat. It tastes like goat or venison, and nothing against those two things, but I have to cook them a very specific way or I'm just like, I'm not feeling it. With the wool breed sheep, I actually prefer it. Now, there are some breeds that will make a stronger tasting mutton than other breeds where, like my Gulf Coast natives, they don't develop mutton. Like you can butcher a Gulf Coast at 6 months or 6 years, it will taste the same.
Interesting.
Other breeds of sheep where they do have, different eating patterns and wool patterns and that kind of stuff, they will make a stronger flavored meat as they get older. But I mean, here's the thing. Flavor's not bad. It's just in our country, we want fast cooking. It all tastes the same. There's no nuances. And we kind of have tended to have our palates develop to less flavor, which again, there's a lot of politics behind that. And so I think we should make flavor great again. So, there's a lot of homesteady people who have platforms who are like, well, you don't want to do a wool breed because it tastes nasty. And I'm like, well, how many wool breeds of lamb chops have you actually tried? Because you're just repeating a rumor you heard. So so that's the whole thing. So there are hair sheep. There's Katahdin, there's St. Croix, there's Barbados Blackbelly, there's Dorpers. And I don't necessarily have anything against those breeds. It's just, I'm a fiber artist and I have my passion is sheep milk. And then right after that is wool because it's such a valuable commodity for the homestead on a couple of different levels. Like it improves soil. You're healthier if you wear it. It's antibacterial, antiviral. And so to avoid a wool breed just because you're not educated about wool or the management of wool or the taste of the meat just kind of irritates me. So, anyway, so there you go. But to answer your question, you can, definitely get meat from your dairy sheep. Now, there's the dynamic of the dairy critter of they're putting all that protein into milk production. So, you're not going to get a fast growing lamb. Like you're not going to get a huge carcass within 6 months like you would with a meat specific breed. That being said, dairy cows have a reputation for having a really nice, tender meat.
Yes.
And I think the dairy sheep are the same. I mean, you don't get a ton of meat, but I mean, if your primary operation is dairy and the meat is a side thing, it's very much a nice side product to get. So we really like our sheep meats that we get. So, but we don't get it a lot, which again is historically, in the medieval ages, meat was actually like the last product shepherds were looking to get from their sheep. Their primary product they wanted from these large flocks was manure, because the sheep were the fertilizing agents of the medieval world. And the next product they wanted was milk, and then they wanted wool, and then they wanted meat. So, and again, I will say it's delicious. I mean, it has all the health components of beef, but it has higher B vitamins. So it's just, I really like lamb and mutton. So
yeah. Fascinating. Hey friends, so I'm interrupting this episode for just a second to talk about something that I actually used to be really embarrassed about. So much so that I never talked about it publicly. And that is the fact that every summer I would basically completely fall out of love with cooking. So much so that I just didn't want to do it anymore. And I was thinking that I was the only one who felt like that until recently, when I started to share my deep, dark secret online. And I found out that many, many of you feel the same way. I think it's just because we have so much going on in the summers that it's just really hard to find that motivation to get in the kitchen and put food on the table. The problem is, our people, well, they still want to eat, unfortunately. So we still have to find ways to nourish them and ourselves in a cost-effective and healthy way. So I've been wrestling with this problem in my own life, and, for those of you, for many years now, trying different things, experimenting with different ideas. And I finally have created something that I think may just help. I know it has helped me. It's called Mealcraft, and it's not your typical meal planning system. Rather, it's a set of customizable frameworks that are endlessly flexible based on what you have in your gardens, your pantries, your freezers, your larders. You don't have to go to the grocery store to do specific shopping trips or anything like that. We're just using what you have, which really is what homesteading is all about. So Mealcraft gives you 4 new frameworks each month. And I'm personally having so much fun with these because they can be different every time. Saves me a lot of money. It's reducing the leftovers and the waste that's coming out of my kitchen. And it just makes it a lot more enjoyable. So if you'd like to join us over in Mealcraft, over 600 of you have already joined the fun. You can visit the link in the show notes to learn more. Now, back to our episode. So my next question is, I want to talk yield.
Okay.
So what are we looking at? Like, let's try to compare apples to sort of apples. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people are somewhat familiar with what they would get from a dairy goat. Mm-hmm. How does the yield of milk from a dairy sheep compare?
So it depends. I have discovered in the last year, so we bought a foreclosed property. We had no topsoil. It's all fescue. We were trying to do, the Joel Salatin thing of no inputs, just rotationally grazed, blah, 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 blah. And it's not working. So we're realizing we really have to do a lot more proactive improvement of our soil. That being said, on my crappy pastures that were hay fields for decades, with my dairy cross sheep, I can get a liter a day.
One sheep.
From one sheep.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Now I am feeding them a stanchion mix, which again makes people very angry or very happy, depending where you fall on this. It's my goal to get to grass fed and just feed them alfalfa in the stanchion. That being said, when I did that, my ewes were showing severe nutritional deficiencies. And if I started feeding them barley and oats and flax, those went away. So, I am very much I don't feed them corn and soy because I can't digest corn and soy. And so I do have to be mindful of what I eats. That being said, if you can digest corn and soy, you just need to be mindful that those are 2 very quickly fermenting grains. And so if you feed your sheep corn and soy, it will mess up their rumen even faster than it would mess up a cow's. So that's another reason to kind of avoid it. I have not had an issue with that if I'm feeding them barley and oats and, the more traditional grains, along with like sunflower seeds and flax seeds and that kind of stuff. They love anything in the cucurbit family. They love windfall fruit. I've had them eat I've had them steal bananas out of my hand. Didn't know they liked it, but you jumped up on me and stole it and ran off. I was like, okay, I guess you're going to eat that now. So
yours.
It's yours. I will not fight. She also stole a piece of pizza out of my hand too. So I don't know if that's just she's odd or whatever, but
so we're omnivore-ish.
Yeah. I'm like, you're supposed to be an herbivore here, girl. Pepperoni's not on that list.
It's not on the list.
So on that being said, like I said, high percentage yeast secretions can give a gallon a day. The other breeds like the Whoopsy, the Asif, and the Lacone are more towards the liter per day.
Okay.
But with the dairy breeds, you're getting a longer lactation. So, for people on micro acreages, like literally 1 acre, you do need to be aware of that. Like, you're not producing a farm product you're selling. You're producing for your family. Now, I have 8.5 acres. I do have the land where I could produce enough for other people. I do caution new homesteaders when they're wanting to get into a dairy business is maybe don't sell the milk the first year, because if you're making your own butter and your own cheese and sheep milk, soap, and shampoo is divine, you're not going to have a whole lot of surplus because you don't really know how much dairy you need apart from just milk for consumption. So, I do think it's very possible to have a homestead dairy operation, but you need to know the math because you don't know what your pastures are going to produce. You don't know what your crossbreed, combination is going to produce. But I would say a good dairy animal that's not, super duper expensive can produce a liter a day, and then you can go upwards from there. So, but like I said, my Gulf Coast natives, they do a pint and that's it. That's all they're going to get. Yeah. It's very creamy. It's higher in cream than the dairy crosses, but there's not a lot of volume.
Okay, that makes sense. So it seems comparable-ish to goats because there's a lot of variables with the goats too. So I think that's good to know. How many are you milking a day to get the milk you need for your usage?
So I have not milked more than 5 a day. Up to this point, we were going to milk, we were trying to milk 10 this year, but we had some issues with, 1 ewe died, 2 more didn't take, and that was when we were realizing our soil fertility was really affecting things. So we haven't gone beyond 4 or 5. This next year, I'm planning to be milking about a dozen. And with just the 4 producing about a quart to a liter per day, that's enough for me and my 1-year-old to drink and make some soap to sell as a farm product. But that's not me getting into like butter or cheese or anything like that. So that's why I'm upping it next year. Is I like sheep milk cheese is just the best cheese in the whole world. I don't care what you think. If you disagree, you're wrong. So
I like it. Some sheep dogma there. That's good. Are you able to do like basically if you had enough sheep milk, could you do any cheese you wanted, or are you limited to certain types of cheeses with it?
So there's a book, Natural Cheese Making, by David Asher.
Yes. I
couldn't remember his name for a second. So he says in his book, if the animals are all 100% grass fed, you're not doing any inputs, the milk can transfer from any recipe to any recipe.
Okay.
I can't speak from experience to that because, like I said, I have to feed my sheep some inputs for their own health. So that being said, what it seems when I poll the dairy boards on Facebook, there are certain cheeses that sheep milk doesn't do quite as well with, like mozzarella or cheddar, because sheep milk doesn't want to be handled very much, whereas cow milk, you can handle it more. And that goes to the sheep milk fat and protein are different shapes and sizes than cow milk, and they have a different mineral composition. And so the chemistry is something you're going to have to play with. So, I mean, if you have pristine horse pastures and you can just throw some sheep out there and milk them and they are happy as little clams, maybe you can do a mozzarella and a cheddar. But if you're not in picturesque, perfect, ideal situations, then there's some cheeses that aren't really good for sheep milk. I have found it's kind of hard to find recipes specifically for sheep milk, unless I go overseas. So I do have plans on the next book will be a recipe book for sheep specific products. So like sheep meat, lamb, mutton, and then sheep milk. So that if you want a fail-safe recipe, you can just buy my book and crack it open and go from there. But, having a 14-month-old has kind of made the plans for that not as fast.
It is hard to write books with babies. I
just got an ebook done, and like my husband was just like, "You're amazing. I don't know how you did this." I'm like, "I don't either." So
They tend to slow you down.
They do.
They're good for other things.
They're great
but they
for
slow
other
you down
things,
on the
but
writing.
not production of Word documents.
Yeah.
So
Exactly. I just want to highlight, because I think what you said it a couple times, it's so important about the inputs because there is so much fairy tale notion around the idea of 100% grass-fed, I think, in the homestead sphere.
Yes.
I am a grass-fed girl, guys. Like, we sell grass-finished beef. I love it. I love the concept. I love the principles. I could argue it all day long.
Yeah.
But sometimes your animals need some grain because we don't live in a perfect bubble of perfection. We don't have the ideal scenarios.
Right.
Not to mention some of these breeds, we've tampered with them enough as in our human breeding and our processes that we've taken out the ability to just thrive on grass. And so I've seen too many homestead animals that are underfed. Not just, dairy animals look different. I get that. I understand that. Dairy cows are bony, but like underfed, and we can't do that. So don't get so stuck on your dogma on grass that you are, you need to know
the why. I mean, I really am becoming more a proponent of the term species appropriate diet than grass fed. I mean, we have American guinea hogs and cooney coons, and we were trying them on 100% pasture. They're alive, but I'm not going to get lard off them things. Like if I was west of the Mississippi and I'm on rangeland that buffalo have been chomping down a nice thick layer of sod on, I could probably do 100% grass fed. I'm in Kentucky. Kentucky, historically, the Native Americans did not settle here. They came in, hunted, and left. Like, no one was raising crops here. So the pastures were not improved from the get-go. And then, the Europeans moved in, and in my area was a lot of hay, which just depletes the soil even more. And, dairy sheep are all European breeds. They need a different mineral composition in their forage than Native American grasses have. So, I mean, I know to not feed my ewes corn and soy because that ferments way too fast. They don't have the protein content in other feed to balance that out, and they will get acidosis and be more parasite susceptible. Yeah. That being said, when people say, are they 100% grass fed? I'm like, well, does windfall persimmons and rotten pumpkins, does that negate the grass fed? Does that? I don't know. So, yeah. So I think we're on the same sheet of music there.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. And, we're just asking sometimes. I love one of my favorite things to read and research is what nature's pattern is and what nature does. But then I also have to remember sometimes us as humans are asking things of the animals that nature isn't. Right. So we have to make those adjustments.
Yeah. I mean, just a milking stanch in and of itself. If you think of the genetic memory of a sheep, if you put her head in a headlock, she's going to panic the first couple of times because that means I'm pinned down. The tiger's going to eat me.
Yeah, exactly.
So I bribe her unabashedly.
Yes.
So
unnatural, but we're doing it. And it's okay.
Right.
It's okay. Yeah. So okay, good sermon. Thank you for indulging me.
You're welcome. I love me a good soapbox.
Yes, good soapbox. I love a good soapbox. Okay, so next question is taste. We have a lot of folks who are scared of goat milk because it's goaty. I tend to, I've milk goats. I think goat milk can taste great as long as you're handling the milk properly. Right. What are we looking at in terms of flavor with the sheep milk?
The best description I have found is melt vanilla ice cream.
Ooh, sold.
So I actually did make a reel at the Homestead Festival. My friend Katya from Salt Lake Beauty Separator, she's like, you got to give these people a taste of sheep milk because that is everyone's big hang up. And I just happened to bring some with me for my morning tea in my son's bottle. So I took food out of my child's mouth to convince the masses that sheep milk was worthwhile. And I gave everyone just like a tablespoon taste. And without fail, on the reel, I did not edit out any negative reactions. Without fail, every single person either had their eyebrows shoot up to their hairline or they yelled with joy or they asked for seconds. I mean, toddlers are notorious food commentators. They think they're hummingbirds. They want sugar. Like they want it sweet. Yes. They want it delicious. We'll have friends come over, bring their toddlers, still need some milk. I'll give them, A2 grass-fed Jersey milk. And the kid's like, okay, if I give him sheep milk, we have to cut them off. Yeah. Because they will drink the entire gallon and then get bloated and have diarrhea. So don't do that.
Don't do that.
But, it's a really, really, it has the feel in your mouth of goat milk, but it has the thickness and the sweetness with a little bit more of Jersey milk. So I did have brown Swiss milk one time, and that was probably like the most comparable to sheep milk, but it wasn't as sweet and it didn't have as much butter fat. So,
Okay.
you know, some people really can't tell a difference between milks, and other people are like milk connoisseurs. And so,
Sure.
you know, I would say if you have the opportunity to try sheep milk, you definitely should, because goat milk is very polarizing. You know, like it really depends on breed. It really depends on how it was processed and how it was stored and how old it is. I have had sheep milk that's 2 weeks old that I found in the back of the fridge, and I was still able to drink it fresh, because sheep milk, because it has such high fat content, ferments slower than the other milks. So,
interesting.
yeah. So again, that's another thing you have to be mindful of when you're cheese making, is that, you know, gallon for gallon, you will get the most cheese out of sheep milk, but you really need to pay attention to your recipe, because you cannot take a cow milk recipe and just slap it on sheep milk. You can sometimes get away with that with a goat milk recipe, but you still kind of have to be careful, because the fat is so much higher in sheep milk than goat milk.
Is that fat rising to the top, or is it like the goat milk that it's kind of naturally homogenized throughout?
It's naturally homogenized, semicolon. I have found that the sheep milk that I found in the back of the fridge, it was 2 weeks old, had a nice cream layer on top. Now, you're not going to get all the cream out of it. So if you want all the cream out of your milk, you really do need a cream separator. But I mean, if you are on a budget and you just can't afford one more gadget, if you put your sheep milk in glass, put it in the back of your refrigerator, and wait about a week, you can skim some cream off of it. So,
okay. So you've mentioned butter several times. Do you have a cream separator, or are you doing the skimming?
I do have a cream separator. I have done the skimming a couple of times just to see if I could. Or, you know, like I just want a cream now, and there was some in the fridge, so I just skimmed it off. But if I'm wanting to separate like over a gallon, I'm using a cream separator, because the volume of cream makes it worthwhile to have a cream separator. So,
yes.
So I love the Slavic Beauty Cream Separator. It's a very small business. It's high quality. It's all the parts are made in Europe. And the owner's a personal friend of mine. But there's not a ton of cream separator brands on the market, but as long as you're making sure it's not made in China, you should be good. So if you get the one made in China, it will explode on you. So don't do that.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yes, don't get the one made in China. Don't get the one made in China.
China cream separators. Yeah. Okay, good to know. Exploding. Okay. I think my last big question for you is, let's say someone's listening to this, they're feeling wildly inspired, but they're like, where the heck do I get some dairy sheep breeding stock? Like, where do I start? How do I find them? Maybe they don't live near you and they can't get some of yours or get on your waiting list. Right. Where do they start to find some in their area?
So the North American Dairy Sheep Association just started this year, and I'm very excited about it. I'm so excited. I let them sucker me into being on their board. So we'll see if I live.
Good job.
Yeah. So their website just went live. And so we're starting to get people becoming members of that. And we're hoping that can be your one-stop shop for breeding stock. On Facebook, there is Dairy Sheep available in North America, and there's Homestead Dairy Sheep are two of the boards. I think there's Natural Sheep Husbandry is another Facebook board. You have to be careful with those boards, though, that aren't the ones that says specifically available in North America, just because the Facebook algorithm gods get mad if you say, I have an animal for sale, please buy it.
Right. Yeah. It's so
annoying. I've had people ask me where to get just sheep milk, and I've referred them to those boards, and no one there will say a thing, because they're like, we don't want shut down. So, I mean, that is the on side of this being a brand new cutting edge thing. I mean, the safest route to get a consistent supply of sheep milk for yourself is to just get your own sheep. That I would say your best bet right now would be the North American Dairy Sheep Association. And then after that, if you can't find something in your area, go on Facebook and look at the dairy sheep boards and see if you can find something.
Okay, awesome. I don't know, I think the most exciting part of this whole thing to me, not that I have time to dive into this, but just for someone else, I'm thinking it's so new, you guys. There's so much potential here. That sort of thing just lights me up. So I hope this inspires people to look into this a little bit more, because I don't know, some people like well-beaten paths. I like blazing the trail with a machete. So this sounds like you get to do that, and that's really exciting. Oh yeah, at homestead events, there at this point, goat milk soap is a dime a dozen. I am I know.
I am the only one with sheep milk soap, and people will buy a bar just because they're like, "How is it different?" And I'm like, "Well, I've used goat milk soap for 10 years, and I still have to slather on lotion afterwards. Yeah, I don't have to do that with sheep milk soap." So, they'll buy it just as a novelty and a curiosity. But, and then there's the whole wool dynamic as well, where, I did just write an ebook on 5 uses of wool for the homestead, because so many people don't realize it really is a valuable commodity for just mulching your plants or.
Okay, hold on. Hold on that you said that, because I saw someone say that online the other day and I'm like, come on, who's doing that? So this is a thing.
It's a thing.
Like, you actually are mulching with wool.
It's an actual thing.
Okay.
So
how fast does it decompose?
Okay, so I have two friends. One is on the Isle of Skye in Scotland, which I sound so romantic saying.
You do sound very fancy.
Doesn't it sound
with
so
the French islands.
Like, everyone's like, how did you do that? I'm like, sheep bond people across the pond. I don't even know. So she's on the Isle of Skye, Scotland, which, I don't know if your listeners know this. Scotland is not notorious for its vegetable and fruit production. She can grow a large variety. Like, she's a very diverse garden because she mulches with wool. I don't know the speed of decomposition, but that's not even the point. Like, it's not decomposed and it's improving the soil and it's making the plants healthier. I did find one study. There's a website called ResearchGate. I think it's .net. And if you're any kind of nerding out person, it is a very dangerous place because you will spend hours there. But I found one study where they're working on comparing the health of plants mulched with wool versus plants mulched with other things. And the ones mulched with wool were infinitesimally healthier. Now, conversely, I have another friend in New Mexico, just south of Albuquerque, where, the wind will just the wind will kill your plants, let alone anything else. So she does what she calls waffle gardening, where she digs a shallow indentation and puts the plant there and then mulches it with wool. And she says she's gotten really good harvests that way because the wool will trap moisture in and protect the plants. So, in Scotland, they have the opposite problem. Like, they are drenched all the time. Like, they're wearing wool all year round because it's so cold and wet.
Yep.
And so the wool will wick away the moisture and insulate the plants. And then the components of like the manure and the lanolin and the sheep sweat will nourish the plant. So, it's really fascinating. I haven't had a garden for 3 years just because life circumstances. But when we do get a garden again, I'm going to be mulching with wool and just compare how these other plants in our area do. So it is a thing. I think it should be a more common thing because, a lot of people want wool breeds of sheep, but they're like, we don't know what to do with all this wool. And there is a wool mill shortage in our country. I know how to process my wool. Like, I know how to comb it and spin it and knit it, but that's a skill that takes a couple years to learn.
Yes.
In the meantime, you can felt it, and felt's a very easy product to play with. But, if you're on a homestead and you share your sheep and you have bags and bags of wool and now it's gardening and now there's this and there's that, and you're like, I just don't know what to do with it. Just mulch with the wool and you will have a much healthier garden as a result.
I am so intrigued by this. I also felt a little bad about my skepticism when I first saw that.
That's okay. It sounds crazy.
I don't know who said it initially, but I am sorry I doubted you. Okay, but like my other question is like quantity, because like I use grass clippings. I use a ton. I need a ton of grass clippings throughout the course of a summer.
Right.
If let's say I have 4 sheep.
Yeah.
And I'm not spinning it because I don't know how. Am I going to get enough wool mulch to actually make a dent in my garden if it's a reasonable size kind of homestead garden? Or is it just like a kind of a token thing for a few beds?
Well, it depends on the size of your sheep. If you have 100-pound Gulf Coast native sheep and the fleece is literally 1.5 pounds, then probably not. But if you have like a Leicester long wool where their their fleece is maybe 20 pounds, then you're going to have enough.
Oh,
so, it depends on the breed because breeds, we have, I think, 50 breeds of sheep available in the United States. And they range from 89-pound Shetlands to 300-pound, Leicester long wool Clydesdale sheep. So I don't know if they get 300 pounds, but they're like 250 in size. So, and then it's long wool. So, a long wool breed sheep will produce a wool whose length is 12 inches or so. So, if you think about that, you're not going to just lay that wool down. You're probably going to separate it and then lay those hair, the hairs. Forgive me, other fiber artists. But you're going to cover more ground that way with a long wool breed or a faster growing cold weather type. Like an Icelandic sheep. You're going to have a pretty decent pelt to put down. So if you had 4 sheep and you had a larger breed sheep, I would say I would start off mulching your perennials before your annuals, just because they're going to need that longer term whatever. But I know my friend Jo. It's Josephine, but she's named after Josephine March in Scotland. So she will. Oh,
perfect.
Yeah, I know, right? I'm just like, you are just all of the wonderful things in one person. So she will take her Cheviot Scottish black-faced fleeces, and she'll lay them down in the rows between the annuals. And even though it's not on the plant specifically, it improves the soil enough to where the plants are healthy. And then with the perennials, she puts the wool, directly on those plants, and it keeps them there. So, again, it's kind of like goats, where the answer is typically it depends, but it is very feasible if you had a very small flock of wool breed sheep to still improve your garden. You would just have to kind of like know what you decide what you want. I mean, if you want your wool breeds or your milk, and then you just want that wool for mulch, I wouldn't get a teeny tiny heritage breed sheep. I get a bigger, more improved breed sheep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, indulging that rabbit trail, because you said that. I'm like, I have to ask. So fascinating. Okay. There's a lot of options here. Like you got manure, of course, you got the fiber, you've got the meat and the milk, and you got mulch. Like what else could you want in a homestead animal? I feel like it covers all the bases.
Well, and then you've got horns. I mean, from some breeds of sheep, and you've got lanolin, which is, they've done studies on cancer patient, and the lanolin helps offset the chemotherapy, skin conditions they develop, because your skin's able to just automatically absorb that into your skin, versus other fats don't have that instantaneous absorption.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, they really are just your all around. You want to be self-sufficient. You don't have a huge amount of anything. I mean, these were the animals the peasants owned. I mean, if you look at the language, sheep, lamb, mutton is actually an Old English word for older animal. Like all those words directly correlate to the products that come from that animal. If you look at cows, for example, you have beef, you have veal, and those words are actually French in origin. And so what that means as an anthropologist and a linguist is that the richer conquering people had the bigger animals, and the smaller conquered people had the little sheep. And, the Industrial Revolution, they had to proactively convince and ostracize and really spread rumors to get the peasant people to move away from sheep to cows. And it took a while, because the peasant people were like, there's a reason why this is our thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
it works.
It works. Yeah. So I do.
Oh my goodness, Rachel. Yes, this is so good. Thank you so much. You have completely shifted my views on sheep, like truly.
Okay.
I kind of came in like, I don't know, it's like whatever. But no, I'm a fan. Even though I don't know if I'll invest in sheep in the near future because life, but this is fascinating. So where can folks get more information about all the things you're doing? I know you have an awesome book out on dairy sheep and your website. So can you give us the whole spiel on where to find you?
Sure. So my website is whoopsydaisyfarm.com. And that's where all of our farm products are. I have a blog option on it, and I really, really, really intend to update it regularly. But again, I have a 14-month-old. So we do have a fledgling YouTube channel that I keep getting peer pressure to ramp up. And again, internet in the rural areas and a 14-month-old. Someday I will do that. But I am on Instagram pretty consistently, and I do have a Facebook page, and those are Whoopsie Daisy Farm. So, and then
your book is the Homestead Guide to Dairy Sheep.
The guide to Homestead Dairy Sheep.
The guide. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. And it's good, guys. It's really comprehensive, and I think if you are going to be getting into dairy sheep or you're looking into that, the book is a must-have. So
yes,
grab
and
that.
I am starting to write some ebooks on specific topics, because like in my big book, I do have in the training chapter how to bring a new sheep home, but I went through it really quickly. And so since then, I've been getting more questions of like, no, I need you to flesh this out a little bit. So if you go on my website, I will be putting out a couple of ebooks on the really specific topics people are asking about. So there's that option available. So
awesome. Well, Rachel, thank you so much for sharing your sheep wisdom. This has been extremely enjoyable, and I'm feeling inspired. So
great.
I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Jill.